know better than to ask you if a book is almost finished. However, I heard that at the Northern Arizona Celtic Heritage Society tea, you
Mhm.
may have mentioned something about book 10 and when it might be ready. Would you be willing to share that with me slash us?
Uh, well, what I said was, because somebody asked, I said, as I always do, I would be working on the book if I weren't here talking to you. And then I added, as not to be insulting, I said, actually, the book is coming along very well, and I'm trying not to go many places so that I can finish it. And I have hopes that it will all come together by the end of the year ish. I then, of course, added what nobody listens to, which is that does not mean the book will be out the day after I finish it, because there are all kinds of things that happen in a publishing kind of way. And, while I'm sure they will be rushing to get as much of that done as they possibly can, as fast as they can, it still takes months. I mean, it has to be copy edited, meaning that somebody has to read it one word at a time and make marks about anything they don't understand or think is a mistake or whatever. I then have to go back and read all of their markings and so forth and say, no, I really meant that. And no, don't change this. Yeah. Or wait a minute, that one is a mistake. Let's do it. Let's do it this way. Rather than just change the word, I'll rewrite the sentence. Put this in instead. So anyway, this is very painstaking and it takes weeks, but it has to be done because otherwise the book will be all full of typos and mistakes and stuff like that, which we don't want. This book's going to be around for a long time, presumably, and we don't want it to be a bad book in any way, shape, or form. Consequently, all of the publishing stuff happens. So first, I talk to two editors, UK and US, and they will tell me their thoughts on this, that, and the other. Usually, these are just long phone conversations, and they're going through and saying, "Oh, I love this." I'm going, "Good." That's one of my favorite parts. They're saying, "Well, I don't understand, why this person did that," and I say, "Oh, well, that's because this. Do you think we should put in a little warning before we do that, or should I do something ex post facto to clear up any possible misapprehensions?" And we do that back and forth over the phone. This may take a few hours, or it might take a couple of days, depending. This will be a large and complex book. Okay, so those are just preliminary steps. Okay, when we go through the editing and my changes, which take time, and then we go through the copy editing, that takes a lot of time. At that point, we actually have a manuscript that is ready to go to the printer and be printed. Okay, now I'm not counting things like the internal design of the book, which somebody else is doing, thank God. Unfortunately, we have lost our artist who has been with us through the entire series. Yeah, she unfortunately died a year or so ago. Which is terrible,
Oh.
but that means that they have to find a new book designer who may have different ideas, which means I will have to look at her ideas. It's almost always, well, it might not be a female, it mostly is, but maybe not. Anyway, I have to look at the illustrators or designers' ideas and see, is this good? Is this kind of in keeping with the series as a whole? Or is it, something flamboyantly new, but it's so good that we'd like to do it anyway? So, artistic choices back and forth, back and forth. All right. Now, I already told them what I want on the cover, so we'll see if I get it.
Are
But
you always very specific about that piece, or have you become more so over the books?
oh no, goodness. Now I'm very into every element of the book. Anyway, all of this stuff has nothing to do with the writing of the book. It all happens after the book is written, and I cannot predict how long it will take. Uh, because the other thing is out of their control as well as mine, and that is the printer. It's a big book, which means that it needs a long bed press, as they call it. And at the end of the COVID epidemic, almost all of the printing companies that could do that had gone out of business. There were only two left. I'm hoping there's two left now, but there might only be one. But that means that there's a backup of big books waiting to be printed. And they would have to pay a lot of money for it to skip the queue and be printed earlier. They might think it was worth it, they might not. Or they might just not be able to do that. With one of my books, some famous general who had written an autobiography suddenly died just before his book came out. And so that one bumped one of my books, way back because they had to get that one out right now. Yeah, and this thing you can't predict. Yeah, so I don't know about the printing. I can't control the printing. And then, once it's printed, it goes through shipping and that kind of stuff. That is a little more, if not predictable, adjustable because for some reason their normal shipping is not working. There are other shippers. There's alternatives. Things like the printing, the copy editing, and so forth. The alternatives are very limited if they exist. So it's not in my control. What isn't in my control is writing the book.
I remember at the Surrey International Writers
Mm-hmm,
Conference
mm-hmm.
that the Fiery Cross somehow
Ah,
jumped into publication, missing a major editing step.
well, yeah.
And so does the editing go on all along, or is it literally waiting until you're finished and then it goes to editing?
They would like to start editing as soon as I have a piece that's readable. Sometimes I put my foot down and say, no, this is just still in too much flux to do that. If I have a piece that looks reasonably good, I say, yeah, go ahead. If there's something still awry, we can fix that in the copy edit phase, which I will, because I will not let go of the book until I have read it all. And so, yeah, it is possible for editing mistakes to still be there when they print it, but it's not common.
Well, since I brought it up, what was the situation with the Fiery Cross? I don't remember.
I don't either. I mean, that's been a
Oh,
long time ago.
yeah, yeah. Well, I remember you saying that it was like something like an extra 40,000 words were in there.
Yeah, I think they had duplicated a chunk. Yeah, well, that's the sort of thing that they can take care of in the next printing, and they did.
Oh,
So it would
okay,
only
okay.
be, a certain run of the books would have had
I
that error,
gotcha. I
which makes
gotcha.
them collectors' items.
And then at one point, I remember reading that this was maybe not the final book.
Oh no, it is the final book. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just that there will be other, side books like Lord John, for instance. He has another story just called Lord John and the Black Chamber, which I have not started writing yet, but I know about it. And it's having to do with his adventures working for British intelligence.
And then you have this
Oh,
is
and then
not the
there's
title, but What Does Frank Know? Master Raymond, the
yes,
prequel of Ellen and Brian. Can you talk about
yes,
any of
yeah,
those?
to a certain extent, but none of them is written other than small bits. There are some
Okay.
pieces of the first prequel book because I was actually writing it when they started the show, and was thus able to give them a, an overall synopsis of the story, which they've been using, luckily enough. But now they're into the second, and I had just told them in general terms what happens in the second and third books. So as far as I can tell from the dailies and so forth, they're doing quite a good job with the second season. Yeah, yes, I'm quite
Oh,
happy with that.
they're finished filming the second season, aren't they? Of Blood of My Blood?
Yes, they are, but it certainly won't be released before the end of Outlander.
Oh, yes. I saw that it was coming out in the fall, it said.
They haven't told me, but I'm sure that's right.
Well, I mean, it was an ad in before one of the episodes
Oh, okay.
of
You can
Outlander.
probably believe that then.
Yeah. I went to the National Trust for Scotland Foundation USA
Mm-hmm.
annual
Mm-hmm.
gala because I was in New York City,
Oh yeah,
and I think you were an honoree there,
I
maybe
was.
in 2022 or something.
Yeah, later than that, 23, I think,
Okay.
maybe
Um,
24. It was fairly
did
recent. Yeah,
did they do it at the Metropolitan Club?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that was, Gilded Age, gorgeous. It was
Yes.
so
Uh-huh.
beautiful.
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
Jamie Roy was there, and
Oh yeah.
so I got to meet him, John Bell, Richard Rankin, and Matt Roberts. So Jamie Roy was in a tuxedo, and I said, "Where's your kilt?" And he said, "I wear a kilt every day."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
First he said, "Well, I lost my luggage," and I was like, "Really?" And he was like,
Yeah.
"I wear a kilt every day." But I thought they'd finished the filming a while ago, but I
They did.
okay. I don't know why he's still wearing a kilt, but you talking about them using your material for season two of of Blood of My Blood. That's a good segue into season 8, which I, as a fan, have thought done a beautiful job of that so far. And so let me just ask you, what was your, like, let's talk about pre-episode 807
Hmm. Hmm.
and then,
Yeah, I thought it was a good season. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the episodes, I really love 805, 806. Those were great. 802 was great. The others were perfectly fine. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and then we got bizarre 807. Yeah,
Yes.
so what's your impression of episode 807?
Ah, well, yeah, they pay me to be a consultant on the show, which means I read the scripts and so forth, and I tell them what I think. Half the time they pay attention to it, the other half they just don't, which is their prerogative. But I do my best to not, just pick holes because I don't like something. I stop and think, well, why did they do it this way? Yeah, that I can see why exactly. I would prefer it went more like the book, but I see why it's too cumbersome or too expensive, or it would cause a disjuncture. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why you don't just film a book page by page, and most of them are structural. Some of their changes, though, impact the characters, or distort something else that's somewhere in the book. Some of them is just, historical errors and things like that. Anyway, it's my business to catch as many of those as I can, and I just tell them about them. In some cases, I just note it, that this didn't happen on this date. It happened, 2 years later. If you want to do it this way, take the name of the battle off it so people don't know that you have the wrong one, and something like that. Or, sometimes they'll do something and they'll say, okay, I understand why you did this, but if you do, I can tell you what the fans are going to say about it. And, sometimes that makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't, either because they don't believe me or because they're perfectly happy to stir up a fuss amongst the fans because it's, good press and so forth. Because you make a lot of noise, people start watching the show. So anyway, as I say, I read the script and I say if there's something good there, I say so. I praise the writing, oh, this is a good idea. Yes, it varies from the book, but it's going to vary from the book because, as I say, you cannot film something like that. So it's always going to be restructured. Things have to be rearranged, and then some things like the babies that Claire helped into the world, the twins and so forth. Yeah, one of them apparently died at birth, and Claire was able to resuscitate it. So they decided that should be a black family, and I'm thinking, well, all right, they're not in the book, but why not? If that's what you want, it doesn't make any difference to the plot, etc. So that was just an innocuous change.
I thought it might be because it's harder to get Native American actors in
Well,
Scotland.
well, yeah, you can't basically.
Yeah.
Yes, but that family weren't Native Americans in the book. They're just regular old white people.
Oh, that's right. There was just the dad who was a mix, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking for myself, I could easily pass for an indigenous person of several different countries. It's not that hard to find a semi-dark skinned actor. Um, but they want to be as authentic as they can for, own voice kind of reasons and things like that. Not saying that's wrong in any way. Just saying this is why they do make some of the decisions that they do make. In this case, they changed the race of this particular family, and the situation was the same, except that it introduced a little more tension between the father of the family and Jamie and so forth, because obvious. But they handled that nicely. And it carried on then with Mr. Whitaker coming and warning Jamie about Cunningham and so forth. I loved Cunningham, by the way.
I did too. He was great.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Kieran Bew is his actual name. Yeah, but he's fabulous. Mm-hmm. He played him just right.
When he first came on, I wasn't sure. He did not fit my idea,
Mm-hmm.
but he really sold it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he comes off a little more smarmily than he did in the book, but it fit the what he was playing at the time.
And
Yeah,
what a beautiful speaking voice he has.
he does. Yeah, really gorgeous. Yeah. No, the only minor objection that I had, and it wasn't enough of an objection to make a fuss about it, was that they decided to make him an army captain rather than a sea captain. And I assumed that the reason for that is that there had just been a battle that they mentioned, that had happened. And so if he had been on the winning side of that as a British captain, that would, provide a sense of animus between him and Jamie to begin with, which legit. Yeah. But I had a number of fans, one of whom is a retired Coast Guard admiral, who were quite upset at that. I said to her, I said, well, he is a sea captain. And I said, that's because, as you well know, if a man is willing to take on the sea, he's willing to take on anybody else. And also, a sea captain, by necessity, has to make his own decisions in the middle of chaos and stress and danger and so forth, because it's him and his boat in the sea. He can't send to headquarters. He can't ask for help. He's going to make up his mind what to do. And so a man like that is going to be of a particular character, which Captain Cunningham is supposed to be. Said army captain, no, they take orders all the time, and they'd be thinking, can I get away with this, and so forth. Anyway, it didn't make a lot of difference to the actor's portrayal of him. It's just, if you're expecting a sea captain, he's not it.
So you were saying those types of changes make sense, and they,
Oh yeah,
you make comments and they make sense, and then
yeah.
we have episode 807.
Yes. Well, sometimes they make comments and they make sense, but they choose not to do it. And sometimes well, they don't bother explaining why not. It's their show. I tell them the comments, they can take them, they can leave them, they can change things, they can do what they want. And they did, And so I don't complain about it. But when we came to the script for 807, I was reading through it and I was just thinking, there is actually no way I can make any effective or useful comments on this. I mean, it's just, well, it was in the hands of somebody who is not guided by the book, shall we say?
I remember in the very beginning, Ron made a big deal of saying that half our
Or making it for
writers
the
have read the
fans.
books and half of our writers have not read the books. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe Tony was in the half that hadn't read the books. I think that's right.
I'd be willing to
And
bet that's right, but I don't know.
because they wanted, non-book people to have a representation in the
Yeah,
writer's room.
yeah,
But it's
that
not, but the
worked.
storyline is not her decision. That was made when they broke the whole
And they
book.
broke script. Yeah,
Yeah, like
presumably, yeah.
to do the Faith storyline, obviously, started in season 7.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of acting out the story that Jamie and Claire were narrating the story. I actually felt sorry for them to have the
Mm-hmm.
burden of that dialogue to try to
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
something with. And in some of the scenes, I could feel they didn't buy what they were saying.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Mm-hmm.
they're usually these amazing actors, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
not coming across. And
Well, even the best actor has to have material. Yeah, no, that was, well, it was partly the fact that they had decided that they had to explain the faith storyline. But,
And
they
what
did.
about the fact that William has now fallen in love with and had sex with his half niece?
Well, she's dead and there was no baby. So,
Then has his dad kissing in the drawing room, which is just
oh, I
ludicrous. I
hated
mean,
that. That was
it's
just,
it's
yeah, that's
ludicrous.
character assassination. Yeah. No.
I don't understand why Matt, who is a lover of the books
Mm-hmm.
and has been around long enough to know that when they go off piste this far, it always is not good. So why did he just allow this, do you think?
You'd have to ask him. Yeah. Yeah. My guess is that, somebody or somebodies were saying, well, we're getting all these questions about the faith storyline and why did this happen and why did that happen and how about the song and the lace maker and all this kind of, much of which was not in the books at all. Yeah. And somebody got the bit between their teeth and decided, well, we have to go all in on this and start explaining things, because everybody's asking. Saying, sometimes you just raise questions, you don't have to answer them. I think there was a certain, I was not present, so this is just pure speculation, but I think there was probably a certain sense of, well, this is the very last season, we have to kind of nail down all the corners and pick up the loose ends and kind of, tuck things in neatly. I think that is possibly what they were thinking. Then again, it's possible that that writer or another actually had been thinking deeply about the Faith storyline and thought they had figured it all out. And so they thought, well, we'll just explain it to the audience and then everybody will be happy.
I see what they were trying to do. And I
Yeah.
can imagine that in the writer's room, there was like this, oh my gosh, and then what if this happened? And that would be such good TV. It didn't pan out
That's
for
just
me.
how it works. Yes, exactly.
Parts of the Fergus demise storyline actually worked because
It did.
they just swapped out somebody.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it had, and then you got Lauren Lyle, who is
Oh,
just,
fantastic. Yeah. No, that was marvelous. Yeah. I
I
mean, in a
mean,
bad way, but in a
just,
heart-wrenching way.
so do you think it was just, some creative, like create some drama? Because some of the non-book people like it, actually.
Yeah, well, they don't have anything to compare it to. Yeah, exactly. They don't know what really happened, so of course they will accept anything. And, it's their privilege. This is one reason why, the book is never like the show and vice versa. And,
Yeah.
most people figure that out and either decide I can live with both of them, or I really only like this one, or I really prefer that one. And, it's an individual kind of thing. So that's all fine. Now, the one thing that I do know is that someone on the show mentioned to me that they were horrified at the idea of having to film Henri Christian's death. And so I
Mm.
figured, well, that's why you decided to kill Fergus instead, because you had to have, a dramatic death for, catharsis and all that kind of stuff. But that's why that happened, presumably, is because they just couldn't bring themselves to kill a
Yeah,
baby.
and we talked about that, because somebody in our group said that was really hard when I read it in the book, Carmen and I were saying, yeah, but she has her muse, and
Mhm.
she sees it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes she's like, I don't want to write this, but
No, that was
that's
one of them. It was very upsetting. I cried very hard while I wrote it. It was, this is
yeah.
terrible, but it happened. There it is. I mean, sometimes these things happen. The faith storyline, I could just leave that one a lie. I let them do whatever they want with it. And in fact, I told them, I said, look, I'm not touching that. You do whatever you want with it. So anyway, I'm thinking there isn't anything useful I can tell them. So I didn't send them an official comment sheet on that episode.
Did anybody say, oh, you forgot to comment on this one, or did they
No,
know?
nope, nope. They
Yeah.
didn't ask. They didn't
Yeah.
ask for comments. Yeah,
So you think it was mostly a drama thing, like create chaos and
I think so.
uproar in the fandom? Because it
Yeah, to
definitely
a
has
large extent.
worked.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, you cause controversy, you get more viewers. Yeah.
I felt there's a trust that you have that I
Good
felt
point.
like, in Matt to do a good job with your books
Yes.
because he
Yeah.
does and he has.
It
So this
does.
episode felt almost like a betrayal a little bit, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, in all justice to Matt and so forth, we had a long conversation last time I visited the studio, which was, last year. Anyway, in the course of things, he was talking about, the faith storyline and so forth, and asked me, what are you going to do about that in the books? And I said, I'm not going to do anything with it. Said I am not touching that. You can do whatever you think you need to do with it. So essentially, I gave him carte blanche to do what he did.
I thought it was not a problem
No.
when they left it on the periphery, which it might be this and it could be that, and but
Mm.
when it became center stage and a whole episode and all of Jamie and Claire's dialogue and scenes were dedicated to this, I felt
Yeah.
that was just a disservice.
Yeah, I thought it was, not well structured in terms of, dramatic intent and, totally out of character, for Jamie, Claire, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's the one cardinal sin is to not keep character in acting context and so forth. And so I guess that would be my main bottom line complaint is that it forced the actors not to act.
Well, to not to get out of character. The
Yeah, uh-huh.
scene where, Claire talks about Mother Hildegard, maybe she meant
Hmm.
this and all that. That's the one that I thought was where I was like, I can't even get into what
Yeah.
she's saying
Why
because
would
it's
she be
so
doing this?
not
It's all
Claire.
over the place. Yeah, and it's not relevant. And yeah, but yes, you're right. It's not clear.
And then to
So
say, I'm so scared because, and he's like, hold on to me, Claire. I mean, it was just, anyway, sorry. It was
yeah,
melodramatic and weird.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing is the writer was picking bits and pieces out of other books. The Hold Me, Claire. If I start to shake, I can't stop. That comes from a very dramatic moment in the end of Outlander where they're at the Abbey and he's just been telling her what Blackjack Randall did to him. He's waked up from a nightmare of being flogged to pieces literally and so forth, and she's trying to hold on to him. So to take something like that, which is genuine and has content and so forth, and stuff it into this, yes, I didn't like that at all.
And that's where I'm like, did nobody read this else besides the writer and say,
Well, I read it, but as I say, I didn't think there was anything that I could, say that would help.
but other people on the writing team read it?
Well, I would certainly hope so, but I don't actually know. I don't,
Yeah.
I kind of don't mess with the writer's room as such. I will just send my comment sheets to Matt and Meryl jointly. And yeah, that's it. I don't even send them to the writer of the episode. I figure they'll share whatever they think that writer needs to know. And that way also I can be very honest about what I think if there's something wrong with the writing or the plotting or something without getting up the writer's nose in a personal kind of way. If they think my comment is valid, they can pass that on in whatever diplomatic language seems appropriate.
It's a
Workable
good
thing.
system. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes they take my comments into account. Sometimes they just don't. They ignore them, which is their privilege, as I say. I didn't look at it myself, other than I have seen the dailies. So yeah, so I saw Lauren and Fergus's death and all the really great parts, but I didn't have to watch the explications of Faith. I just
I would love to be a fly on the wall to know what Katrina and Sam thought.
I didn't talk to them at all during that. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't normally, unless I have something of a social nature, or if there's something really specific that I think needs to be in an episode, and I have doubts as to whether it will be or not. Then I'll talk to whichever one of them is doing it, and explain why it's there. And usually, I'll make sure it gets done. This reminds me of something in the first season when I was, watching the dailies every day and so forth. It was the scene where Claire takes lunch to Jamie in the stable and he's, telling her about eating grass and being out with the broken men and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, they shoot these scenes over and over and over. So they were doing that, and Sam was sort of losing attention and horsing around and so forth. And he said something out of character, and she said, "Shh, it's Friday. Concentrate."
I loved that was a great scene.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, he did concentrate after she told him that.
I mean, actually, I'm a fan first. I don't want to know what happens, but
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
can you say, do you think that the story is redeemed in any way in the last three episodes?
Let's put it this way. I hope so because I wrote two of them.
Oh,
Well,
wonderful.
However, yeah, I wrote 809. It's got my name on it. I co-wrote 810 with Matt because he asked me to do that. It was his idea to give me co-author credit. So I did not write a whole lot of it, but
But that gives me hope
yeah,
because
no,
I think Matt does a
it's
good
going to be a good
job. I think
episode.
he's
No, he is
he's
good. He's very, very concentrated, and he actually does love the books and the characters, and he is true to the character. No, he loves the characters. He's been living in their heads for a long time.
And did I read that Ron D. Moore wrote the next episode, 808?
I didn't know that if he did, but possibly he did. To know.
And he generally does a pretty good job too.
Yeah, he's a good adapter. Yeah, so if he
Okay.
did, that's good. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted, to have his finger on the last season. Anyway, I did write 809, but they frequently will take my scripts and mess around with them. Usually it's just changing a line here or there or putting in some bright idea that they had at the last minute.
So
But I'm
you
told
wrote
it's good.
809, but it was edited somewhat.
Yes,
So we'll see
yeah.
what that is. But that gives me hope that
Mhm.
you wrote 809, co-wrote
Mhm.
810, and Ron
Yeah,
did
808.
808.
Yeah. I think it's going to end up the season well with those last three episodes. With luck, everybody will have forgotten about 807, or at least, exhausted their ire about it.
Do you think there's any way there will ever be a reunion season 9?
I really don't, just because the actors will have moved on by that time. They don't really want to come back and reprise earlier versions of themselves. I mean, it's
Oh,
possible. On
okay.
the other hand, there is book 10, and it will likely be, well, it'll be at least a year and a half before it's published, possibly 2 years. Anyway, but by that time, studios have their own ideas about things. And given that to date, when they realized they were running out of Outlander, they said, "What did I have?" And I told them about Blood of My Blood, which instantly morphed into this TV show. Is going along quite nicely. And yeah, I can't tell you what I've been talking about with them otherwise, but it's not book 10. But anyway, they continue to be hungry for more material, which means that, if book 10 is in any way successful, and I certainly intend it to be, then they'll probably want to do something with it. I can't tell you what. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this will be 2 years down the line. Maybe Sam and Caitriona will be deeply embedded in other projects and won't want to take it on. Maybe they will not be embedded in other projects and would be happy to do a season that's just book 10. Possibly
Go.
someone wants to do a movie in book 10. I don't know.
I,
Somebody's going to do something with it. As I mean, Sony has an option on the film rights. They can say yes or no if they want to, if only if they said no, we're never going to use this, and they're not going to do that. They never give up film rights. So it's just that if, when, etc., kind of thing.
I feel like
They'll do
they're
something.
going, yeah. And I think a movie, I personally don't think that'll work very well.
I don't think
Um,
so either. It's too
yes,
intricate, and there's too much stuff going on in that.
yes. So I think Sam and Cat will have this time to go do all these other things, and then
Mm-hmm.
it'll be like a reunion season, and they'll
Uh,
be all their friends and
mm-hmm.
a paying job and
Nice predictable schedule. You picked up in the morning and dropped off at night. Yeah.
exactly. And it's they are keeping the machine going.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So the production values on Blood of My Blood very high
Yes.
because they just have all the same crew
They have the
and
same production facilities. Yeah.
yeah,
Except now it's four
exactly.
times bigger. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my
Yeah. They're
hope.
doing a
I'm
wonderful
holding
job.
out for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure something will happen. I just don't know what. Yeah. There's definitely a strong urge on the part of the production people, Sony, etc., to continue, doing Outlander type things.
There's a
Depends. Mhm.
built-in audience thanks to you.
Yes, there is that. Yeah,
Can you briefly comment about your decision to house all your Outlander stuff at A&M?
they asked for it.
Did they? They came to you and asked for it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had, been thinking about it in minor terms. And, I'd chatted a little bit to the University of Glasgow when I went to do the honorary doctorate thing. And they, very politely gave me to understand that that wasn't quite in line with what they did, which is true, it's not. And I was not offended and they were not bothered. Several years ago, I had actually asked Northern Arizona University, which I graduated from with 2 degrees, if they would be interested in this. And they sort of looked horrified, like, why would we even think of that? No, what they do have is almost exclusively Arizona based things by, old cowboys and original settlers and things like that. And, I could see that, what I write definitely doesn't fit in their collection, aside from the fact that I grew up in Flagstaff and went to their university. But also at that time, I was not nearly as famous as I am now. My guess is if I'd offered it to them now, they might have taken it. But you have to consider the value of the archive as well. Texas A&M has a huge archive. They are the worldwide foremost collectors of science fiction and fantasy. They have George R. R. Martin's stuff and a number of many other very well known by name, and not just fantasy or science fiction authors. They have a lot of heavy hitters. So I will be in respectable company. Yeah, anyway, they invited me to come out, talk to them, see their setups. I spent, 3 days with them and was very impressed with their scholarship and their management of things and so forth. Yeah, so anyway, no, I feel very happy with that decision. In fact, they're coming out sometime in May to, start packing up some stuff. Yeah, they won my husband's heart when he described the rooms full of foreign editions. I said, "Oh, we'd take them all." He's going, "Really? You would?" Yeah, you just made yourself a deal here.
So did you call George R. R. Martin and get the scoop? Because I know you guys are buddies, right?
Yeah, no, he's we like we see each other once a year for breakfast or something. But he's told me several times about Texas and A&M, whom he likes a lot and thinks they've done a really good job with his archives and all that.
Well, that's good to hear. And it's so great to see you, and I appreciate the
Mm-hmm.
time
Well,
out
lovely
of
to
the.
talk to you as always.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Your voice has vanished, but you're still there. So goodbye, good night, have a good time, and talk to you later.